and we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Hello and welcome to another episode of a conversation with. We're going to continue with our theme of power and control this week. If you haven't already listened to the previous episode, pause and go and listen to that and then come and jump right back in here, because that episode lays the foundation for this one. It lays the foundation of understanding the different dynamics that a perpetrator will use in order to maintain that power and control within the abusive relationship. Domestic abuse can cause serious long-term health effects. It will significantly increase the risk of mental health problems such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Women and men who experience domestic abuse are more likely to suffer disabilities from their cardiovascular system and their musculoskeletal problems such as chronic pain, arthritis, or even respiratory problems. Undetected domestic abuse may result in misdiagnosis, improper testing, inappropriate treatment or management of health conditions. And some of those health indicators that you may come across can include complaints of headaches, including migraine, back pain, chronic neck pain, vague and distant complaints that you can't really diagnose. There might be some psychogenic pain. There may be some digestive problems such as nausea, abdo pain, gastro issues, diarrhea, constipation. There could be appetite disturbances, so such as like significant weight loss or significant weight gain. There could be actual assault injuries that you're dealing with, such as injuries to their wrists, for example, or their arms or their legs. There could be multiple or frequent injuries, such as contusions, abrasions, minor lacerations. There may be even some human bites in various stages of healing. There could be sprains or fractures. There could be burns such as cigarette or carpet burns. There may be even some gunshot or even stab wounds. There may be some stress-induced hair loss or scalp injuries. There may be some concussion. There may be some bruising to the neck and the back of the head, which would be indicators of potential choking or headbanging. There could even be signs of sexual assault, injuries to the genitals and or the breasts, for example. There could be complaints of painful intercourse or sexual dysfunction. There could be injuries during pregnancy, such as fetal injury or miscarriage. 30% of women who are pregnant are likely to experience for the first time physical violence, or the abuse can actually escalate through pregnancy. There could be multiple terminations, multiple miscarriages, multiple pregnancies, which could be a sign of reproductive coercion, where the partner has control over the birth control. There could be sexually transmitted diseases. There could be signs of sexual infections, such as pain or itching or unusual discharge. There may be UTIs, bladder or kidney infections. There will be, or more than likely be, some effect on their mental health, such as depression or anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia. There could be eating disorders such as anorexia or bulimia. There could be frequent use of pain medication. There could be abuse of drugs or alcohol. There also could be suicidal ideation, attempts, self-harm. All of these clinical indicators have been consistent with those patients that are attending a healthcare provision, and there is domestic abuse. So what we want to be looking at is being able to appropriately respond to those disclosures of domestic abuse. So being confident in being able to ask questions to our patients. So we're going to look at the medical power and control wheel, and we're going to kind of go round those different segments and what those unhelpful responses will be versus those actual helpful responses. So we will look at the confidentiality and violating the confidentiality of a patient. So who's with the patient? Who's in the room? Is it safe for you to ask those routine questions? Is there a family member or even the perpetrator that is answering all the questions? That the behaviour is domineering, where the patient is sat there feeling very scared or looking very nervous, whilst the family member and or the partner are asking those questions. So let's make some space. Let's do those routine inquiries without the partner, friends or relatives, including any children, because it doesn't give her the autonomy to be able to speak freely. And so you know, you need to be able to give that space. And if you've got a perpetrator or a family member, then that is not going to be a safe time for you to be asking those routine questions. And those routine questions could be: have you ever been emotionally or physically abused by a partner? In the last year, have you ever been hit, slapped, kicked or physically hurt? If so, by who? Within the past year, have you been forced to have sex against your will? If so, by who? And are you afraid of your partner? So for routine questions that will be able to kind of direct you into asking more questions, or referring where necessary. So don't be asking those routine questions in front of other people. That violates her confidentiality, and it doesn't make it safe for her. If there is no way to ask those questions, then is there a way that you can do a follow-up? Can the person speak English? Is the partner or the family member the one that's interpreting? Can you get an interpreter? if you suspect that there is domestic abuse, but you're not able to ask those routine screening questions, then make a follow-up appointment. Find out if it is safe for you to contact via the telephone, for example. And when I say, is it safe for you to call, actually, does the perpetrator have access to the telephone? If you are leaving messages such as, I want to talk to you about domestic abuse, that actually may be unsafe for that person. So inquire about safety at home. Determine whether that if you can continue to ask those questions, make space for you to ask those questions. Don't violate her confidentiality. Don't be calling the police without her consent. It's important that you do get consent. You may feel that you're doing a great thing by involving the police, but actually you may be increasing the risk and the danger. So involving the police will always require some interaction with the victim, because if the police just rock up to somebody's house, then that could actually cause a problem. Now, there are some cases where that you may not need to get that consent, but ideally we want to be getting that consent from her and having her involvement within that. Don't trivialise and minimise the abuse. So if somebody is saying that they are at risk, if somebody is saying that there is an ongoing threat or danger, we have to take that seriously. And if we don't, then it has a detrimental effect, which could have devastating it can have a devastating impact. And actually, within the last few days here in the UK, it's hit the national media where a victim and her mother was killed by their perpetrator. And there were many, many, many times where the victim had called the police for support and help, and she wasn't taken seriously, which then ultimately led to her being tragically killed. Now, if that had been taken seriously, then maybe she may still be with us and supported and protected. So if somebody is saying that they are at risk, take that danger extremely seriously. There has been cases where there's been an expectation that actually you just tolerate the abuse because you've been in the relationship for many years, or it could be that your partner has got dementia or some other cognitive dysfunction going on. Well, if there's always been abuse, if there has been elements of domestic abuse, coercive control, physical violence or sexual violence, and that's the baseline, and then the perpetrator then develops like this cognitive dysfunction, the baseline is still going to be anger and aggression, and that actually can be extremely risky. Just because you are older doesn't mean that you can't be a perpetrator of domestic violence. And so if we are minimising or trivialising the abuse and just expecting somebody to just live within it because their partner has got some form of dysfunction going on, then we're not doing any justice to that victim, because we shouldn't just be expecting that patient just to be putting up with high levels of abuse just because somebody has got dementia. People, there is the abuse always lies with the perpetrator, never with the victim. So us minimising that abuse feeds into that same tactic that the perpetrator will use and minimise, and the victim also uses that tactic of minimising. So if we as professionals also are minimising, how do we expect that patient to be safe? don't blame the victim for the abuse. Like, don't be asking questions around, what did you do in order to provoke the abuse? It happens. It happens a lot. There was a case where I was supporting somebody who was stabbed and had life-changing injuries as a result of being stabbed. And I was in a setting and I had to challenge a number of professionals because these professionals were using language like, well, what did this person do in order to be stabbed? Now, we're talking within a domestic abuse kind of circumstance. That is not okay. We definitely do not and should not be blaming the victim. We want to be empowering the victim to be able to disclose that abuse to us. And so asking and laying the blame with the victim doesn't do that. And it can cause more issues where they don't disclose, and therefore they could be at more significant harm. So focusing on her as the problem and using language like, well, why don't you just leave? Why do you put up with it? Why do you let him do that to you? Is not helpful. Domestic abuse is a very, very complex issue. As well-meaning as you may be in using those kind of phrases, actually, all it does is put the onus and the blame back on her. Actually, like, the responsibility of the abuse lies with the perpetrator. So we should always be putting that back onto the perpetrator. So if somebody is sitting in front of you and disclosing that they are scared, your response being, I believe you. How can I help you? You're not to be blamed for this, because there are no circumstances where a victim is responsible for the abuse that they are subjected to. It is not their responsibility. It is not their fault. So by responding appropriately, such as you're not to be blamed, puts the onus of that responsibility back on the perpetrator. Not respecting her autonomy, so prescribing divorce as a solution to the problem, or kind of suggesting that they go to a refuge. Again, I would assume it would be well-meaning if somebody is doing that. However, divorce, yes, maybe, but there are many reasons why people stay in relationships, a number of them which prevent somebody from leaving that relationship. And if you look at the previous episode, that it's very complex of why people don't leave. The fear could be a motivator of why they're staying in the relationship. So just prescribing divorce or couples counselling is not going to be helpful. And just for the purpose, couples counselling where there is abuse is not going to work. All it does is it gives the platform for the abuser to be able to continue that abuse. So as a advocate for victims of domestic abuse, I would not be advocating for couples counselling. So because it's dangerous and it's harmful. Also, how many times have you had the same patient come to you and making the same complaints about the same issues or the same symptoms, and you're you're giving the same advice and you're just getting to, like, here we go again, I'm saying the same thing. And then we can kind of be quite dismissive of going, well, I've told you this before, well, actually, let's not do that. Let's not punish her or him for them not taking your advice the first time. Again, domestic abuse is extremely, extremely complex. So it takes time for somebody to get to the stage where they have the bravery and the courage, one, to report, and secondly, to leave. So if it means that you're having the same conversations 5, 10, 15, 20 times, then you have those same conversations 5, 10, 15, 20 times, each time being respectful, each time putting the onus of the abuse back on the perpetrator, each time informing her that she is, or him, that they are being believed by you. And so just don't kind of dismiss somebody just because they haven't listened to your advice the first time. We need to be asking if it's safe. We need to be asking if it's safe for them to go home and not be afraid of doing so. So if somebody is saying, I feel scared, us asking the appropriate questions. What are you scared of? Is there something at home that you're frightened of? So we need to be able to confidently ask those questions and confidently say, is there somewhere else that you can stay? By failing to recognise that danger, increases that risk and escalates the danger for her. So we need to just ask the question, is it okay? Somebody's not going to shout at you or scream at you or make a complaint about you by you inquiring if they're safe. And then kind of referring on where necessary and where needed. And like normalising like the victimisation, right? So failing to respond or refer to disclosures of domestic abuse by not responding to that domestic abuse or having that professional curiosity, it increases that danger and that risk to that victim. And so, we can kind of get into this mindset of this kind of narrative that we're normalizing we're normalizing abuse because well, no, actually, we need to not normalize the abuse that's going on. Let's not kind of feed into this narrative that this patriarchal society that therefore abuse is normal. Well, actually, even if that is something that you believe, men should not be abusing women in any way, shape or form. And so the more that we can have that narrative across society with all professionals, there may be a time where I wouldn't need to do these podcasts or even be in a job, because actually there would be a society where men are not abusing women and women are not abusing men. So there are 5 R's of the inquiry. So recognise and ask the questions. So just ask if it is safe for them. Ask about the home. Ask about the danger. Respond appropriately to that. So validate the patient, by saying comments like, I believe you, this is not your fault. When somebody is disclosing, they're going to be extremely vulnerable. They're letting you in. So be mindful of that. Obviously, risk assess. So what is the risk? Is the abuse getting worse? Is it unsafe for them to go home? Is there immediate danger? Do you need to do a referral to children's services? Do you need to do a referral to the local domestic abuse organisation in your area? Do you need to speak to your safeguarding team? So do a referral to your safeguarding team. Give your patient information about their local services and record. Make sure that you document all inquiries. The people now have access to their medical records. There may be a way that you are able to hide some information from online access in case the perpetrator is able to access their medical records. So record any concerns that you may have. And so hopefully this little episode has been able to empower you with the next time that somebody makes a disclosure to you about abuse that they may be experiencing, on what to do versus what not to do. Until next time. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time.